Good morning, everyone. I would like to go ahead and call the January 17th Nevada Commission on Ethics meeting to order. Is Commissioner Olson and Moran on? I don't see them. Can BPS tell us if they're on?
Yes, ma'am. Hello, this is Kim in broadcasting, and there is no one by the last name of Olson. Is that the name that you mentioned?
Yes, and Moran.
Yeah, we have Commissioner Lowry, Commissioner Yen, Mr. Chisholm, and Brandy Smith have joined. Okay. And that is it.
Okay, can you, Executive Director Pedroza, can you please text them and say, and maybe can BPS send them another link? Maybe that's their problem?
Certainly, Chair. One moment, and
Thank
we will
you.
go ahead and see what we can do.
Thank you.
Bet.
All right, good morning, everyone. Commissioner Moran, can you please come on camera for us, please, so we can see you? Don't see him.
Chair, Commissioner Moran has not joined the Zoom.
Oh, he hasn't, okay.
And we are in the process of resending the links.
All right, since we have a very packed schedule today, we're going to go ahead and get started. And we'll start with roll call. Chair Wallen here, Vice Chair Towler.
Here.
Commissioner Lowry.
Here.
Commissioner Olson. No. Commissioner Moran. Commissioner Scheer.
Here.
Commissioner Yen. On staff.
Here.
Okay, thank you. On staff, we have, and please note their presence once they appear on Zoom for me. Thank you. For staff, we have Commission Counsel Jensen. Here. Executive Director Armstrong. Here. Associate Counsel Bassett. Here. Senior Legal Researcher Pfaff. Here. Investigator Terry. Here. And Executive Assistant Pedroza. Here. Right. Please stand for the pledge. Oh, all right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, at this time, we're item 2 for public comment. Executive Director Armstrong, has the commission received any public comment by email or mail to be read into the record?
Thank you, Chair. We have received no written public comment to be entered into the record.
Okay. All right, BPS, are there any members of the public on Zoom or online that wish to make public comment?
If you would like to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, if you would like to provide public comment, please press *9 now. There are no callers choosing to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you. Next item, approval of December 7th, 2023 commission meeting minutes. All commissioners may participate except for Commissioner Lowry, who is excused for the December 7th meeting. Commissioners, are there any changes or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'll move to approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
Right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And we still don't have Commissioner Olson or Moran, so we are going to move around on the agenda a little bit. We're going to go to item 5, discussion, review, and possible action related to advisory opinions, proposed format updates as presented by the Commission Council. Commissioner Jensen, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Would you like me to present from this location?
Whatever works for you.
Okay.
And I can click through the slides. I have the slides up, so if we can get those up for
Thank you.
the viewers at home, that'd be great.
Brandy Jensen, Commission Counsel for the record. Commissioners, we are here today to determine the advisory opinion formatting that has been discussed previously at our other meeting. As you can see in some of the opinions that have been sent to you recently, we were discussing some of the various options. Recently, can you go to the first? Where would I see the slides? Oh, thank you. I can do them here too. I
Let me
was just
see.
wondering if he's-
BPS, can we get the slideshow up on the screen? That'd be great.
Thank you. One moment.
Thank you. Recently, I took a class on communication, and the most important things to be persuasive in something that you're trying to do is make sure that you're telling them what you want them to know, what you want them to feel, and what you want them to do. So in our advisory opinions, these are people who are working day to day as public officers and employees who are seeking guidance. We want them to know the ethics laws and how to interpret them. We want them basically to feel inspired to comply, and then also to continue and educate others and use those advisory opinions for knowledge. Previously, the structure on the advisory opinions was the statement of the case, the question presented, the findings of fact, relevant statutes, commission decision, conclusions of law. And there's a new structure that we're going to go through in this presentation to see if you concur. One of the great things the executive director pointed out is that previously we had been using the seal of the state of Nevada, and it might be time to use the seal of the Ethics Commission. And so I would like to know if the first thing I'd like your approval on is to go ahead and use the seal instead of the state seal.
Are you?
Do we need a motion
Phil-
for that?
Well, hey, first, fellow commissioners, you have any comments, suggestions about doing this? Right, hearing none, I will go ahead and entertain a motion to start using the Ethics Commission seal versus the state seal.
Commissioner Yen, I so move.
Do I have a second?
Commissioner Lowry, I'll second.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
In order to move quickly, I'm not going to go through every slide that we have up here since our day is a little bit tight. I do have the mission statement if anybody should choose to review it, and some of our guiding principles that basically highlighted say that our highest priority is to protect the citizens by interpreting the law, having our opinions thoroughly researched, consistent with precedent, and that we continually improve our public communication, including the advisory opinions. So previously we discussed them being consistent with precedent, and in our research, is it searchable? So one of the things Commissioner Teller expressed was the importance of the advisory opinions being so. There's a little over 700 cases in the opinion database, and trying to navigate them from when I've been speaking with outside legal is a little bit difficult at times. So we were hoping to try to navigate this a little bit better in the formatting and improve our opinions with some type of topic list. So one of the first suggestions, if you can go down to the topic for me, Rose, is having various topics at the top of the opinion. The primary ones that we tend to see the most probably are cooling off, disclosure and abstention, contracting, gifts, and government resources. If you can go to the next one. It would look something like this when you're looking at your advisory opinion, which is just, it's at the top with a topic. And then I'm not sure if you want me to try to also do subtopics. So you can see things like disclosure and abstention, and then it could be something underneath regarding a more specific topic. Does anybody want to comment before I move to the next slide?
Why don't you go ahead and do your presentation, and then we'll have the commissioners.
Perfect, Chair.
Comment.
Thank you. We wanted to make sure that the advisory opinions were responsive to the requester, that they were a little bit easier to use, succinct, using common language, and the summary. So the summary would be the first page of the opinion. The benefits is that it's easy for somebody to read the first page when they're researching and pulling up the opinions, to read it quickly in the first page and say, oh, this has nothing to do with my situation. I can move on. It also helps with the topics. The summary at the beginning would look something like the next page on the slide, which just has it. The goal would be to be one page if at all possible on that summary. There are some times when it's a little more extensive, but for the most part, I've been able to fit all of it into one singular page at the first start of the opinion. Another question is where do you want to put the supplemental information? Recently, they've been put into the conclusions of law. If we don't have a hearing, it's noted that in the conclusions of law, and also other things. If you could go to the next slide. Relevant ethics statutes, please, Mr. Armstrong. The location of the statutes, sometimes when you're reading through them, although we are very focused on the statutes, a lot of times the reader is not. So if they want, the lawyers will likely be when they're reading through it. So I'd like to contain them within the opinion, and would like your guidance and your motions on whether you want that at the end of the opinion, after the signature page, or after the conclusions of law, or if you prefer them where they were previously, higher up in the opinion. And also whether you want them in the standard font that the rest of the opinion's in, or the font of the legislative website, which is a much smaller font. So the summary of the changes is that there would be the one-page summary in the beginning. There would be a topic listed there and potentially subtopics if you deem it appropriate. There would be common language where appropriate, not as much legal ease to be able to guide as many people for ease of use. There would be the supplemental information contained in the conclusions of law. The statutes would be at the end of the advisory opinion. And as we previously ruled, we would publish only the abstracts containing new precedent for guidance. Generally, they're provided to you with the 1 week to vote. And if you look at the structural comparison, the previous structure and the current proposed structure, I appreciate a motion and guidance on how you would like these advisory opinions to be finalized.
Thank you, Commission Counsel Jensen. At this time, I'll open up to my fellow commissioners for their comments, suggestions, observations. So who would like to comment first? Commissioner Yin, please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Wallen, and thank you, Commission Counsel, for the presentation. I do like the summary at the beginning. I also like the topic. I think it might be difficult to narrow down to subtopics. So I'm not adverse to having a subtopic, but I would definitely be in favor of having the summary and the topic, and I could do away with the subtopic. I do like the new structure of the presentation. Being an attorney, however, I appreciate the statutes up front because that's how I would want to read it. I would want to read the law first. I'd be curious to hear what my fellow commissioners who are not attorneys think, because I think that's a lot of the people who are going to be using these opinions will probably be non-attorneys. So if the opinion of the commission is that it's much easier to read the opinion with the statutes at the end, I can understand that. But as an attorney, I like the statutes and the law to be up front. So that's my overall. Everything else, I'm fine with the suggested changes.
Thank you, Commissioner Yin. I'll just pop in here real quick. As a non-attorney, I prefer to have them under the findings of fact and have the law there, because when I read a document, I feel that conclusions of law would be at the end of the document and not in between. So I prefer having the statutes first. So as a non-attorney, so I'll just pipe in there. So thank you. Next commissioner that would like to comment? Commissioner Olson?
I would agree. I prefer the statute in the beginning, then you kind of can tie it into what you're reading afterwards. So I like that, and I would support that position.
Thank you. And coming from a non-attorney, thank you. Commissioner Lowry, did you have your hand up? Yes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commission Counsel, for the presentation. Much appreciated. I agree. I think the topic section is a really good idea. The summary, great idea. Agree with Commissioner Yin. Whether you do subtopics, I could go either way. Agree with my colleagues that in terms of flow, for me, it would be facts, the law, and then the conclusion of law. I do have some question about the time frame of 1 week to vote. And here's my concern. With the 4-day work week that Commission Council has, Monday through Thursday, if she puts out an opinion on a Monday and commission members, let's say, get to it by Friday, and it's due to go out the following Monday, I'm concerned that Commission Council won't have enough time. Let's say someone disagrees, we need to discuss it, whatever happens, that because of kind of that 3-day Friday, Saturday, Sunday piece, that it may not be enough time to get it out in a timely manner. So I'm certainly happy to make the 1 week time period work. I'm just concerned whether or not it's truly realistic, kind of given those parameters.
Madam Chair, I got a text from Mr. Brandt. He's waiting to be admitted to the meeting.
I saw his picture. I saw him on video just a few minutes ago. See, there he is. He's just not in. So, Commission Counsel, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. So that the commission understands the process internally, we would give you an entire week to vote. So it would be sent out on a Monday. Your vote would not be due till the following Monday. And we have calculated in the time frames to be able to do that, where we would still have a couple days to finalize, double check for any last minute typos, and then publish it to the requester. So we give ourselves about a 3-day window in between when it's due back to us versus when it's due to the requester, if that helps give some guidance on the topic.
I just want to
Yeah,
add,
thank you.
Commissioner Lowry, let me just add one comment. My question is the situation we had today that, we called a meeting. So if you're only allowing yourselves 3 days, then is that enough time for us to get a closed session meeting to discuss and then revamp and all that stuff? I know that in the past, I think our previous commission council probably had about a week after we had to respond to go and do that. I mean, I think that, with our timeframes, I think we should try to look at doing that just to allow for that, allow for when we do have people wanting to respond. Commissioner Scheer.
I'm just curious about, and I actually want to come back to the opinion format, but I'm curious about the volume of advisory opinion requests. I mean, it does seem like it's higher than I remember. Now, that was a long time ago, but seems like it's gone up significantly. So I wonder with the timeframes that are built into the statute, whether there's sufficient time or if there's any suggestions for how we might address or deal with that issue. I think you're right, Chair, that we should have a week still after we have all voted by email, if that's the case, to then schedule a meeting if necessary. But I'm worried about the volume of opinions and the timeframes in the statute and figuring out how we fit all those together.
Executive Director Armstrong, I saw you kind of nodding. Would you like to let Commissioner Scheer know how the volume is now compared to how it was maybe pre-COVID and in the last couple years?
Yeah, this is Executive Director Armstrong, and COVID really screwed everything up in terms of trying to find trends. But for the 5 fiscal years, so we had a surge in activity in fiscal year 2019. Before that, we were averaging about 12 to 15 advisory opinions a year. And I think last year, I was just going to look it up, I think last year we had about 45. So the volume is much higher than you remember, which is great. I would love to get to a spot where we have more advisory opinions than complaints. The statutory time frame is 45 days. We do have the ability, requesters can waive that time and grant us extensions. In addition, there's a process where the Commission Council and us as a team come up with questions to ask the person. We need more information to actually execute on. And so that 45-day clock resets when they send their materials back. But there is that statutory time frame of the 45 days. I think the chair is right, probably a 3 to 5 day window between when the votes come in. And some of that can be, it just takes some time to figure out, like, okay, this is pretty easy, straightforward opinion. This one, is more complicated. We should try to get more time. The challenge is making sure there's enough time to do solid drafting before it gets to you, and then have enough time to review, and then if there's questions, come back. There is always the opportunity to have a hearing on an advisory opinion. So I know that in the closed session we were discussing one that could always be an option in those cases where you ask them to waive the 45-day limit and have them come in and present their case to you if there's a particular topic that hasn't been addressed before. So, but that for the jurisdictional recommendations, we try to hit that 7 days in your inbox to allow for the votes back, because some folks set like Tuesday afternoon is their ethics homework day. And so I always try to get out in the morning of that day, and so that you've got a full day and a couple days sometimes to chase down votes if we need to, and that sort of thing.
So Commissioner Lowry, I know we jumped around because to answer your question, do you have more to add to the proposed changes?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Commissioner Moran, do you have anything that you want to comment, say? Commissioner Scheer.
I'll just weigh in and say that I generally agree with Commissioner Yen with regard, maybe as being an attorney, with regard to the format. I would like to see the statutes up, if not up front, certainly before the decision. So maybe if after the findings of fact works for the majority of the commissioners, that's fine. But I wouldn't want it I wouldn't want the statutes at the end personally. With regard to subtopics, I'll just say that I think it's a good idea to have the option of a subtopic, but I think we can leave it to the discretion of Commission Council and the Executive Director as to whether there is a clear subtopic that's worth listing, but that a subtopic should not be required. Should be optional. So those are my comments on the format.
Thank you. Vice Chair Towler, comments?
Thank you. I was looking at the formatting too. I think I agree with what everybody's saying of moving the findings of fact back again. I wasn't sure if we all are in agreement with the current, with how it's going to be formatted. What I wrote down is summary, question presented, findings of fact, relevant statutes, and then I think it would be conclusions of law and commission, well, then there's the last two. And I don't know what makes more sense of doing a conclusion of law at the very end or a commission decision at the very end, but I think that's what we're all agreeing on as far as the format, right?
Yeah.
Based on what I've heard from the commissioners, I had drafted a sketch outline that would be the topic first, and then the summary, then the findings of fact, then the statutes, the commission decision, and the conclusions of law.
I would reverse them and do the conclusions of law and then the decision.
I don't have a problem with that. Anybody else have a problem with that?
I agree with that.
Okay, thank you. This is just my observation. In the summary, because we have to make sure that our opinions comply with 233B. So when we say summary, I don't know how we can make sure that everybody knows that the summary isn't the absolute law decision, because there might be something within there. And so maybe we should put something in the summary that says, and even call it an executive summary, because when I see summary, I feel that that's the be-all, end-all, and I don't have to read the rest. When I see executive summary, that says, this is just a high-level, key things, but you need to read the rest of it to get the full picture. So I don't know if there's some wording we could put in there that, this is something to the fact that this is a summary, but the rest of the opinion dictates our decision instead of the summary being the law. So my fellow legal brains, please weigh in.
This is Executive Director Armstrong. I can say that what we can do is that's an easy thing to put in a footnote, right? Summary, footnote, boom, and then explain. We can look to, a lot of appellate courts we can't use their term because it would be very confusing for us because they have abstracts before opinions that kind of do the same thing. So we can look to the language there that explains this is a summary and not part of the official decision.
Commission counsel.
If it brings the commissioners comfort, the summary is literally almost identical to the conclusions of law. So it is, at least you know that the summary does contain exact language. There's no modification within the summary that's not contained within the opinion as well.
But I thought our whole idea of the summary was to put it into kind of more layman's English terms that non-attorneys can understand. So that's why I'm just saying if our whole goal was to have something that, as you've said, your fellow city council members and stuff, I mean, they got an opinion and they'd be like, what does this mean? What does it say? So I think having it in layman's terms with the caveat that the rest of the opinion is the law. So, Commissioner.
Yeah, I agree with Executive Director Armstrong. I think a footnote that says that, this summary is provided for convenience and ease of use and does not represent the actual opinion of the commission, which is set forth below or something, whatever.
That's perfect. So yeah, so if we can do something like that. So any other comments from my commissioners, discussion? Right, then I will entertain a motion to make the changes where we have, let me get my thing here. We start out with the topic, then some executive summary with a footnote that what Commissioner Scheer said, and then questions presented, findings of fact, the statutes, then commission decision, conclusions of law. Oh, conclusions of law, and then commission decision, sorry. Everyone agree with that?
Yes.
Oh, and subtopics are optional.
I could make that motion.
Please do.
Vice Chair Towler, for the record, I'll make that motion.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much, Commission Counsel, for your presentation and your thoughts. And I think having an executive summary will be really good for our constituents that are out there. So thank you very much. And are you guys opposed to calling it an executive summary? Because I think that even highlights it even more that it's not. Are you guys good with it being executive summary? Okay, right. Great, so make it executive summary. Thank you. All right, next item, since we have everybody here. Let's go ahead and move to item number 4, I think it was. Yes. Item number 4, which is discussion and possible action to approve a proposed stipulation concerning ethics complaint number 23-048C regarding Kevin Chisholm, Assessor, Mineral County, State of Nevada. Proper notice has been provided and waivers have been received for ethics case number 23-048C, Chisholm. Vice Chair Towler, Commissioner Lowry, and Commissioner Yen served on the review panel and are precluded by NRS 281A.2204 from participation in this matter. All of the remaining commissioners may participate and vote on this matter. At this time, I would like to ask the counsel for the parties, and in this case, the individual, to identify themselves and their clients for the record.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Elizabeth Bassett, Associate Counsel for the Executive Director.
Mr. Chisholm? Mr. Chisholm, you need to unmute yourself.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay.
Can you state your name for the record, please?
I'm sorry, this is Kevin Chisholm.
Right. Thank you. Right. Next item, I would like to ask our Associate Counsel, Bassett, to present an overview of the proposed stipulation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The complaint in case number 23-048C alleged that Kevin Chisholm, Mineral County Assessor, violated NRS 281A 400 subsection 7's prohibition against using government resources for private benefit when he used the county email account to challenge and discuss his landfill assessment levied on his own personal real property. The Commission directed the Executive Director to investigate these claims. Following that investigation, a review panel found that the matter might be resolved through a deferral agreement. However, Mr. Chisholm and the Executive Director were unable to reach an agreement as to the terms of a deferral agreement, and the alleged violation of NRS 281A 400 subsection 7 was referred to the full Commission. The parties participated in a settlement conference presided over by Commissioner Yen, assisted by Commission Counsel Jensen, and as a result entered into the proposed stipulated agreement before you today. The terms of the agreement are that Mr. Chisholm agrees to stipulate to one non-willful violation of NRS 281A 400 subsection 7. Because Mr. Chisholm already attended in-person ethics training with the Executive Director during the pendency of his matter, no further training requirement is included in the agreement. No civil penalty is imposed by the agreement either. The Executive Director and I believe that the terms of this agreement are appropriate for the following reasons. Mr. Chisholm has not previously been the subject of an ethics complaint. Mr. Chisholm cooperated in the investigation and the resolution of this ethics complaint. The seriousness of Mr. Chisholm's conduct is offset by the legitimacy of questions raised by the emails he sent regarding his own landfill assessment and the countywide assessment process that had application to his job as the assessor and assessments against individuals other than himself. Mr. Chisholm did not realize any financial gain as a result of his violation because his landfill assessment was not adjusted and he paid the original full amount that was assessed. Although Mr. Chisholm inappropriately used his Mineral County email for personal matters, Mr. Chisholm's concerns regarding the county's use of an aerial photograph program were validly related to his official position as an assessor. Mr. Chisholm voluntarily attended in-person ethics training with the Executive Director during the pendency of his matter. And Mr. Chisholm has worked internally with other Mineral County officials to bring resolution to his concerns about the county's assessment process, which affects other Mineral County residents and which were raised by his assessment. Given the information obtained in the investigation of this matter and the mitigating factors discussed, the Executive Director and I believe the terms of this stipulated agreement are appropriate in this matter. We'd like to thank Mr. Chisholm for his cooperation in the investigation and resolution of this matter, and would like to give special thanks to Commissioner Yen for her time and her assistance in the settlement of this matter, as well as Commission Counsel Jensen. I would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Mr. Chisholm, do you have any additions to Associate Counsel Bassett's presentation?
No, I do not. Thank you.
I also want to note that all parties have agreed to sign this stipulation already. I think you had that in your advanced materials, that they both agreed to sign it. At this time, I'd like to see if any of my commissioners have any questions of either party. Any questions from my fellow commissioners? All right. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion on the stipulated agreement.
Can I move to approve and then make a comment? Or make a comment and then move to
Make the
approve?
comment first.
Okay. I will say, that I think the facts of this case can be read two ways. One, that he was seeking to, Mr. Chisholm, that you were seeking to correct an issue that you saw in the county, or that you were trying to do something that would benefit you personally. Based on the track record as laid out by Associate Counsel Bassett, I'm going to support this, and I'll even make the motion to support this stipulation today. But I do think you need to be very careful going forward in the future, because I think this is the kind of case, if someone's using their official position for their own personal benefit, that we really need to be a little more aggressive on, and I think needs to be sort of the focus of the commission, in my view. So with that, I'd be happy to make a motion to approve the stipulation.
Please do. Can you please read it into the record?
I move to accept the terms of the stipulated agreement as presented by the parties in case number 23048C, Chisholm, and direct counsel for the commission to finalize the agreement in appropriate form.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Am I the only one? Aye. All right. All those opposed say nay. All right. Motion carries. Thank you very much, Mr. Chisholm, and thank you very much for working with our staff in being able to resolve this. And again, I want to thank Commissioner Yen for helping to work on getting this settled for us. Appreciate it. So thank you very much.
I'd like to thank everyone else also. The educational portion of this is very beneficial to me, and definitely be watching my conduct in the future. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chisholm. Have a good rest of your day.
You
right.
too. Thank you.
Next item is item 6, consideration and approval of the commission meeting and attendance policy as presented by the Executive Director. Executive Director Armstrong, please make your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Executive Director Armstrong. Item 6 is a draft commission meeting and attendance policy that we've created. There are some issues that predates the current commission with attendance and meetings, and so we want to put them into a single policy. The first section of the policy talks about the frequency and scheduling, primarily that by the end of a calendar year, we will come to you with the dates for the next year, so you can plan. Last year, for a number of reasons, we had lots of moving dates, which is a struggle, I know, as commissioners, as you essentially volunteers working to fit this into your schedule. So it sets a guideline for staff to provide the anticipated dates for the next year. We do have some statutory timelines that if parties don't waive, we may have to put in a meeting somewhere that wasn't pre-planned. But for the most part, we've found that parties are willing to say, okay, I'll give you a 2-week extension for that deadline if that's when your next scheduled meeting is. So, and also, if you remember from our regulations, we're removing a regulation, 'cause we're we wanted to, reduce the number of regulations that had the specific items about the provision of meeting materials at a certain number of days, and so it is in here in policy before that regulation potentially goes away. And then just a confirmation that commissioners and commission staff will maintain compliance with the open meeting law for those meetings of the commission that are required to. So just an affirmation that we'll be, following the open meeting law, a reminder for staff and commissioners. And then the second part is commissioner attendance, and it talks about the different ways in which a commission member may attend a meeting or to the business of the commission, and that the staff will track the attendance. And then there's notification if attendance falls below a certain level. We've had in times before where essentially we've had a commissioner go MIA for several months at a time, and this puts in a formal process for us to let the appointing authority know, whether that's the governor or the legislative commission, that there is a commissioner who is not able to fulfill their duties. So that's the basics of the policy. It's in draft form. I'm happy to take any suggestions or comments.
Fellow commissioners, comments, observations? Yes, Vice Chair.
Thank you. I think it's reasonable. I mean, it's not asking too much of us. I think if this is something you are able to do and you want to do, you have to make the time for it. One of the helpful things is, being notified of the dates many months in advance, or as you're saying, pretty much a year in advance. As I was going through, because I think we did all receive the dates, I had a couple questions, so I think this might be an appropriate time on that. February, there's no meeting, right? March 20th is the next meeting.
Do you want to bring that up You want to bring that up in Executive Director Armstrong's report?
We could, yeah, if that's
Or
more
does that,
appropriate.
yeah.
Because
Unless this
there was
really
a couple
pertains-
of dates that just didn't make sense to me, but
Yeah,
whenever
but
it's appropriate,
yeah,
that's fine.
probably more appropriate
Yeah.
to stay on
So
this.
other than that, I think it's reasonable as long as, we're sure about the dates, which I can talk about later.
Yes. Other comments? Yeah, I think that this policy is something that it's important because, if you ask to be on the commission and you're appointed to the commission, you have to commit yourself because, one, you're not participating in the jurisdictional determinations, the advisory opinions, and the meetings and the review panels. You're doing a disservice to the commission and to those who are asking for advice or have had complaints filed against them. So I think it's very important that, people do participate. And if for some reason you're too busy to do it, then you need to step down and do the right thing, I think. I think it's very important. And I just want to have one clarification. So participating at meetings means not just popping in and leaving, right? You have to be there. I understand if you have to step out for, a break or whatever, but that's what you're envisioning as participation in meetings?
This is Executive Director Armstrong. Yes, and so we can make that clear in the final version to put, for meetings. It's interesting because we do lots of business by email, right? And so as long as you do the email, you're good to go. But for meetings, I can put in some language about that means attendance for the meeting, for all the business of the meeting.
Yeah, and I understand if you have to step out and take a phone call or take a break, but that means 10 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that. So thank you. All right, not seeing any other, Commissioner Lowry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It might be helpful to have a discussion at this point. I noticed there are times where commissioners, myself included, for instance, the last meeting, my absence was excused. So maybe the chair could discuss a little bit how that factors into it. If a commissioner is going to not be available for any of the various tasks, is the protocol to reach out to the chair? What factors are involved in an excused absence? And does an excused absence factor into the 75%?
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Lowry. I feel that, if you have an excused absence, that factors into being there, okay? An excused absence is, okay, I have a work commitment that came up, all right? The fact that we go and tell people when we have these meetings in advance, the fact that you can do these meetings via Zoom and not have to be in person really opens up the ability to be present and attend. Unexcused absences is you just don't show up, okay? Or, if you're constantly, oh, I have this, oh, I have that, well, that's telling me you're too busy to be doing this. And I think that it should just be something that the commissioner contacts the chair, copies the executive director in there, and then I can say, yeah, you're excused and stuff. We had a commissioner in the past that, he'd call us up down in Baja, California. He called us up from everywhere. I mean, he never missed a meeting. He went over and above. He could have been excused for some of them, but he took his commitment seriously. So I think, are you making an effort? But if you're constantly calling up saying, I have a work commitment, well, I have work too, and I managed to do it. So I think we all can, it's reasonable. Commissioner Yin has work commitments, and she gets excused. And so I think that just contacting the chair and the executive director, and then we can decide. But if you're constantly asking for excuses because I have to go on vacation with my family this month and vacation next month, well, you can work around that. Okay, so even Vice Chair Taller is called in on vacation from Hawaii. So it can be done. So I hope that answers your question.
Chair, I have a couple of thoughts.
Yes, Commissioner Moran.
Yes, I mean, I don't know if we have any comparative, research or due diligence on what other boards and commissions are putting these types of levers in place for attendance. I didn't know, because I didn't hear anything about other boards and commissions, and I represent, clients in front of boards and commissions all over the state and globally, and I just don't remember anyone. Again, we're professionals. We have a reciprocal obligation based on our appointments, and we have duties, and they're mandatory in some circumstances. But to sit here and attempt to monitor commission attendance when we have so many different forms of electronic platform to engage, whether it be Zoom, sometimes audio, sometimes video. I mean, the bottom line is if we're going to allow some sort of an electronic participation like a Zoom call, you can't suggest that there's a requirement to be on TV live and in stereo, because it's just not feasible. But to sit here and have this type of a discussion, I get it. I'm glad that we all want to participate, and it's fun to be on these boards, and we're all doing God's work, so to speak. That is, if you believe in God, like I do. I think that's great. But I think to sit here and to somehow incur some obligation and require our staff to incur some sort of obligation when our public responsibility is fulfilled by virtue of being present, being amenable, being flexible, to be in attendance at these meetings is in some circumstances, to me, it seems a little petty. I mean, at 52 years of age, I don't know. I don't know. I just was kind of surprised to see this on the agenda, but then again, I did some due diligence. I looked into the public record. I saw your public meetings over the course of the last 3 years, and I saw the participation on this particular board, but I don't think it's extraordinary in terms of one individual not participating like they should, going back, a year or so ago, and that individual obviously, decided to not participate. But yeah, I think it's a little petty, and I just don't think it's a very good use of our limited resources that we have, unless there's some line item in the next legislative session where we're going to be issued X tens of thousands of dollars for additional personnel. I don't think it's a good use of the executive director's time or commission counsel's time, and it's certainly not a good use of my time or your time or the public's time, most importantly the public's time. That's just a few thoughts I thought I'd share with you. Again, that's not for defense. That's not for, a reply. That's not for any opposition. I'm just throwing that out into the environment, maybe playing a little bit of devil's advocate too. But I just think it's, I do kind of see it as being sort of petty. And the theme of the comments that I'm listening to here, it just seems a little, I don't know. It seems a little petty to me. I think that's the best characterization I can come up with right now. But thank you for listening.
Commissioner Rand, thank you for your comments. Just on a side note, our executive assistant Pedroza actually keeps track of our attendance because that's how we get paid. So we're not adding any additional work for her. So that's already being done, just so you know. So anyways, any other comments?
That's what I thought, Madam Chair. That's what I thought too. I thought that to be the case as well.
Yeah,
It
so-
just seems like we're going a little bit outside the scope of that Carrie Pedroza, that individual staff monitoring.
We're not going any further than what we're already doing, just that's how we get paid. So other comments?
Just briefly, I guess I understand Commissioner Moran's comments, but as I understand it, the result here is if someone doesn't meet the quota of meetings, there's a report to the appointing authority, and then it's ultimately up to the appointing authority whether there's any ability to take any action. So if there are a significant number of excused absences in a short period of time, that we can obviously make that, explain that to the appointing authority if necessary. If we still going forward think we will have the time to participate fully. So I, under the circumstances, while I understand Commissioner Moran's comments, I'm fine with this policy and prepared to support it.
Thank you, Commissioner Scheer. Other comments? Right. I will entertain a motion to approve the Executive Director's Commission meeting and attendance policy as presented.
I'll make a motion.
Commissioner
to
Yan,
approve it.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, second? Did you second?
I'll second.
Okay. All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item is item 7, report by the Executive Director on agency status and operations and possible direction thereon. Items to be discussed include, without limitation, education outreach, budget update, staffing and recruitment, regulation update, upcoming meetings, and case log update. Executive Director Armstrong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Executive Director Armstrong. I have a written report in the packet, and so I'll walk through that quickly, and then we also have the case log. And then I know that Commissioner Towler, or Vice Chair Towler, has some questions about the calendar, so we can talk about all of those things. So the first thing is education and outreach. We are ready to continue to figure out how to best expand the number of users on our Nevada Ethics Online resource. In terms of outreach, we have a webinar, a briefing for candidates and campaigns next week to help them avoid ethical missteps during campaign season. In addition, our application to present at the Emergency Management Conference in February was approved, and so I'll be preparing a item for that. Another group asked for an ethical part of, they're doing an online advocacy handbook on how to advocate for yourself and your interests in front of government. So we're working on that. And then we had this week a big deadline for people with terms that are not defined, that our public officers have to submit their acknowledgements by the January 15th of every even-numbered year, and so we did lots of outreach on social media. We reached out to the Nevada Association of Counties, the League of Cities, the public lawyer section of the bar, and the governor's office as well, so they could let the executive branch folks know that this requirement was in. And although it means a lot of emails for the Commission Council and executive, all of us on the general NCOE email, we did see a lot of those acknowledgments come in. For the ethics manual, we have a design selected. It's just a matter of finding the time to go in there and help build it because of all the other matters. So once we get the new outreach and education specialist officer on board, that will be something that they can help with tremendously. In terms of the budget, we have implemented we got some of our computer replacement schedule done. A reminder that this is a base year for budget building for next session. And then across the state, there are some issues with the budgeting of the staff COLAs. And so they're trying to figure out how to do work programs at the end of the year to get all of those paid for. In terms of staffing and recruitment, we've completed the interview process for our outreach and education officer. We had over 60 applicants. We had 40 that the state HR group deemed were qualified. I did an initial round of interviews of about 7, and then Commissioner Yen helped me last week interview our 3 finalists. And so a selection has been made. I just have to jump through all the state hoops before we can announce it and make the offer and those things. But I imagine we'll have that person in place by the end of February, which would be great. Our regulation update. Our regulation has officially been assigned a number. So that's always a good first step. And then we've had the initial back and forth with the Legislative Council Bureau as they drafted it. There's always a little bit of negotiation. We put in some language to say you can't do that. They've got good reasons, and so we go back and forth. So I am optimistic that we'll hit that potential rulemaking public hearing for the March meeting on our regulations. And then the upcoming meetings, we'll have a panel in February. We have March 20th in Las Vegas and April 17th in Northern Nevada. But I know that Commissioner Towler wanted to talk about meetings, so this would probably be a good spot to pause before going into the case log. And
Thank you, Madam Chair. After I saw the prior agenda item, I thought it was important that I look at my calendar because my summer is already filling up, and so usually I would just let it fill up and then hope for the best. But I'm trying to, not get a report written on me, right? So I was looking at, I didn't see any dates yet for May. Is that, or was there one that I just didn't hit?
no, this is Executive Director Armstrong. So, and there's a full list in the November ED report, but our target dates for meetings for 2024 are January 17th today, March 20th, April 17th, June 19th, August 21st, October 16th, and November 13th. So that takes us to 7 meetings for the year. Statutorily, we're required to meet once a quarter. The statute actually says if you don't have any cases, you don't even have to meet once a quarter. But when I came on board about 2 years ago, we were working through that backlog, and so we needed meetings every single month. And now we're at a pace where I think about 7, we should be able to get through all of our business if we need to add one. But no, so that's a long answer to your question. May is planned to be a dark month for us as well.
Right, so then the June was my only other question, because that is, June 19th is Juneteenth, which is now a state holiday. I don't know if that was intentional, but it might provide some challenges.
We will have to look into that one to see, yes. So I'll take a look at that one and see if we're closed that day, or if I don't know if they did one of those, it's the third Monday of the, it's the
that
day.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll reschedule June.
All right, I think that's all for me, thank you.
Thank you. You can go ahead and proceed on.
All right, the last thing is the case log. And so for our newer commissioners, we do this once a quarter. You have a unredacted version because there's lots of confidential information in that. There's a redacted version in the public materials, but it shows you where we are in terms of our cases for the year. And we are really on track. I think this last year, in figuring out the flow, I kind of have an internal goal of by the end of this fiscal year, everything from 2 fiscal years ago is done, completely done. And by the end of this fiscal year, everything from last fiscal year is fully investigated. And so if you take a look at the report, with the exception of one item, one advisory opinion where we're pending the opinion, will be all set to go. There's 2 cases that are pending judicial review, but there's no real work for us to do except for get that one advisory opinion out to close up all of fiscal year 22. And then for fiscal year 23, if you take a look, Mr. Chisholm's case was one today that is set. We had a review panel on another one today, and then the others are set for adjudicatory hearings, one today. So I'm confident we'll be able to clear the fiscal year 23 cases by the end of this fiscal year. And then you can see we have quite a bit open for this fiscal year. There's a big chunk at the top, which is pending jurisdictional determinations, which I know you've all been voting on. I don't think any of those that are pending those jurisdictional determinations are likely to result in going to forward an investigation. So we currently have 5 open investigations. We're going to clear 2 or 3 panels in February, and so we are on track to have a very manageable workload in terms of our open cases. So that is all I have in terms of the case log, and so I'm happy to answer any questions or take any comments.
Fellow commissioners, questions? Yeah, Commissioner Scheer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, or Executive Director Armstrong, I go through your outline on page 1, and I note the order of these topics, and I think education and outreach belongs up there. It's probably the most important thing we can do. But I go back to my comment earlier about the number of advisory opinions we're issuing. I think the more education and outreach we do, probably the more advisory opinions we generate. And so that's followed by budget update. And so I think I would like to see maybe at a future meeting some more data on the number of advisory opinions and how those are tracking, and whether we need to think about that as we prepare a budget for the next legislative session, and whether additional staff might be necessary if the number of advisory opinion requests continues to increase. I think it's a good thing that they're going up. I think it's a good thing we're doing education and outreach, but I also realize it means that we may need additional resources to be able to deal with those number of advisory opinions.
Yeah, this is Executive Director Armstrong. I can bring in that data for sure and show those trends. We did, our data is all done on fiscal year, but I always check at the end of the calendar year also. And we went from total incoming, so advisory and complaints, total incoming in 2022 was 150 cases. It was 162 last year, and I think there was about a similar 6 to 8% increase from the year before. So those, if we keep hitting 6 to 8% increases in activity, then there is definitely a strain on resources that we should evaluate.
Thank you, Thank you, Commissioner Scheer. Other comments from my commissioners? Yeah, I too agree, with the advisory opinions, but I have to tell you that in calendar year, this last year, all right, we did not have a commission council in place until basically September. And these two were taking care of jurisdictional and advisory opinions, and they were staying on top of it. And the volume was as much as what we have right now. So the fact that we're going to have a education outreach officer, which will be great because that will take a lot of the burden off of our executive director, so he can spend more time on advisory opinions and what have you. That person will also be doing the media outreach, social media and all that. So that will help us because we've now gotten a whole person back to do that, which is good. And then we do have a commission council. So, but yeah, to your point, it's true. I remember when I think somebody said, oh, if we're going to go out and train, we're going to get all these complaints. And it was true. I mean, it's like, oh, they go one place and then we get a bunch of complaints and stuff. But, the more people get educated, the better, And then maybe we don't have to work so hard with complaints and stuff. So I agree.
I agree.
Yeah. So thank you. Something I'd like to see on here, on our case log, we used to have it, okay? We had more dates of, okay, it was filed on this date, this was the first contact, or, whatever. I'd like to see that just to see if we're staying within our timelines. That would be also helpful, that we're staying in our timelines with responding to jurisdictional determinations and responding to the advisory opinions, because I think that that's important. So if you can add some extra dates on there. So, yeah.
Yeah, this is Executive Director Armstrong. I've been thinking about, we have budget performance standards like built into our budget, and they are due for an overview, and we can change those. And so I've been trying to think about what are some internal and external data sets that help us know our performance level. Are we providing good customer service on all sorts of things? So what I can bring it back is maybe a list of data that would be interesting to know about public records requests and the timeliness of response and complaints, those types of things. I can bring back for the commission for review and say, like, let's focus on these 3 or 4 data sets for internal, I guess, performance measures, and then we can consider whether we want to make those our official budgetary performance measures. Because there's some, and I don't know, the budgetary performance measures are interesting because they're always there, they're always reported, but you don't like get bonus money if you hit your budgetary performance measures. But it does help in telling the legislature your story. And so what I found in previous agencies is that some of those performance measures don't really align with what you're doing anymore, or the importance of what you're doing. So we can begin that process, and I'll have something for you at the March meeting on that.
Madam Chair.
That would be great. Commission Counsel, you had a comment?
Thank you, Chair. Would the commission like for me to present some of those statistics on advisory opinions, or is that something Mr. Armstrong?
I think that would fall under Mr. Armstrong's area, just in his executive director report, because that's kind of the performance standards and stuff. And, and we've got a lot of new people, and so we want to have good customer service, respond to emails, right away, respond to phone calls right away, and just, be there for the public. So, I don't know if you've got your new person coming in, if you want to have some customer service standards on that person or something like that, and the other, not just that individual, but just for the whole office. So, Commissioner Moran, go ahead. Do you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Moran for the record. Just quickly, so when I was on the board going back, I don't know, I think it was like maybe 15, 20 years ago, and served as the chair of this commission, I remember that we were not doing a whole lot of, outreach, and that was one of the concerns. That was, obviously one of the concerns that the legislature had at the time, but also the governor's office, being that co-signing bodies, kind of overseeing what we were doing at that particular time. And I know that we had hired a new executive director and then commission counsel that kind of carried that. I kind of got off at one point, but they continued to do that outreach. And then when I served as a elected public officer, I remember staff at the Nevada Commission on Ethics reaching out to our board and pushing this education thing. And it was very, very good, because it was something that was very helpful for the folks that were just getting into public service. But it also did a lot to put that out into the forefront in terms of, other people, seeing this and seeing this education getting out there and letting people understand what it was that the board actually did. And I want to say that I had asked did it actually slow down? And I want to say at some point after I'd been off, I circled back, and it seemed as though that education effort kind of slowed down the number of complaints that were being filed. So I'm kind of curious too, to see what the actual number is, and what type of outreach we're doing. And I think that if we continue to do that outreach, I think that definitely serves the public good. If I can help be a part of any of that, I'm happy to do that, because again, to see it on both sides of the equation, it was working, and it worked, and it was something that we were not doing going back many, many years ago. And it's just good to see that you guys are now doing this now, and we're doing it now and contemplating it a little bit more thoroughly and in detail. But yeah, that was one thing that I kind of noticed, and I really am a big fan of that education, because you get out there unsolicited, affirmatively, and I think that you're going to there's a value add to that. So in any event, I commend the work that we're doing, what the board has done in the past, and I think we should continue efforts. It doesn't cost a whole lot of money to put out a good deck if we have one. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Moran. Executive Director Armstrong, can you at our March meeting go and show some stats of the outreach we have done since, like pre-COVID, and, each year, how much we've increased in our outreach and how our outreach to social media has increased? I think it'd be a good update to have on your presentation in March.
Yeah, I will make sure, it will be great because we should at that point have our new outreach and education person to introduce to the commission, and I can include that. It's a great example of those budgetary measures and the way we track data being important, because it says how many training sessions did you do? But that's really was it one training session with one person in attendance, or was it one training session? So now we really try to track the total number of people trained, because that's a much better number to tell you what you're doing out there and how many people you're reaching than the number. So some of that data alignment we can certainly focus on in the performance pieces, and then we'll make that a focus of the March Executive Director's Report.
Perfect. And the individual that you hope to bring on, will they be located in northern or southern Nevada?
I can't disclose that now without giving away to the folks who weren't selected that they weren't selected. So I will let you know as soon as I can, all those details.
Okay, sorry to put you on the spot there. Didn't even think about that. All right, so any other comments, questions of our executive director? All right, then I will entertain a motion to approve the executive director's report as presented. Is there a motion? Go ahead.
I move to approve.
Second? There's a second.
I'll second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. We're now at the time where we're stopping for a break. We will reconvene at noon to hear item number 8. So we'll see you all at noon. All right. Thank you very much.
Chair,
Yes.
I just want to confirm that I am excused from this afternoon, as I will not be able to participate in the Shivi matter.
Yes, you are excused. For the other commissioners, Vice Chair Towler and Commissioner Lowry, if you guys want to watch, you're more than welcome to watch. You just can't participate in any voting or discussion. So if you'd like to do that, please do so. Commissioner Lowry?
And thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize for stepping on you. Is there any expectation for the 3 commissioners that are excused because we were on the review panel that we reconvene for the last 3 agenda items, 9, 10, and 11, after the hearing, or the 3 commissioners are good to be excused now?
We should have a quorum because it will be myself, Commissioner Scheer, Commissioner Moran, and Commissioner Olson, so we will have a quorum at the end of this. If for some reason we don't, we'll be texting you to jump on. Hopefully we don't have to. So, yes, so you're excused, but if you want to go ahead and watch, that's fine, just to hear what the arguments are for future cases. That's fine. So,
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
yes, Commissioner Olson.
verifying,
Can you
just
repeat that?
verifying. Yes, verifying, we reconvene at noon?
That is correct.
Okay.
And they use the same link. And you use the same link that you were on before, okay? All right, see you guys all at noon. Enjoy your lunch. Good afternoon, everybody. We have reconvened the Nevada Commission on Ethics. We are now to item 8 on the agenda item. Before I begin, BPS, is Commissioner Moran on? Okay, good. At this time, we're going to start our hearing on depositive motions in ethics complaint case number 23-056C regarding Hillary Sheevy, Mayor, City of Reno, State of Nevada, including providing authority to the chair of the commission to prepare and issue the order reflecting the commission's decision and other matters relating thereto in consultation with counsel for the commission. I want to note proper notice has been provided and waivers have been received for ethics case number 23-056C, Sheevy. Vice Chair Towler, Commissioner Lowry, and Commissioner Yen served on the panel and are precluded by NRS 281A 2204 from participation in the consideration of these depositive motions. All the remaining commissioners may participate and vote on this matter. I want to go and have the counsel for the parties to identify themselves and their clients for the record.
Good morning, Commissioners. Elizabeth Bassett for the Executive Director.
And good morning, Commissioners. John Shipman for Ms. Sheevy. Thank you.
Okay. We have 2 dispositive motions for the Commission's consideration. The first phase of the presentation will be towards the issue of whether a violation occurred. Then the Commission will move forward to determining if the violation is willful, if the violations are willful. For presentation purposes, first, Associate Counsel Bassett will first present argument on the Executive Director's motion for summary judgment. She will have 30 minutes. Second, Mr. Shipman will present argument on Sheevy's response to the Executive Director's motion for summary judgment, and you will have 30 minutes. Third, Associate Counsel Bassett may then respond for 5 minutes. Fourth, Mr. Shipman will then present on Sheevy's motion for summary judgment. You will have 30 minutes. Fifth, Associate Counsel Bassett will present an argument on the Executive Director's opposition to the Sheevy's motion for summary judgment, and you will also have 30 minutes. Sixth, Mr. Shipman may then respond for 5 minutes. And then, as chair, I will ask if any of my fellow commissioners have any questions associated with the case. And to note, commissioners, if you need to meet with commission counsel to talk about any legal questions, we can do that in private. So keep that in mind. All right, so I will go ahead and ask you to proceed. So at this time, Commission Counsel Bassett.
Thank you, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Associate Counsel Elizabeth Bassett. The role of government and its officials is to serve the public interest and act for the common good. On taking office, every public servant, elected or appointed, promises that as a public official, they will seek to promote the public interest and ensure that their actions in government occur without favoritism or discrimination. To preserve the public's trust in their government, public officials must not use their position for personal gain and should avoid even the appearance of having a conflict of interest. To ensure government ethics in Nevada, the legislature has enacted NRS Chapter 281A, known as the Nevada Ethics Law. The Nevada Ethics Law is divided into 3 main areas: improper benefits, cooling off, and disclosure and abstention. The matter at issue today involves the ethics law's disclosure and abstention requirements. It may seem to those unfamiliar with government ethics that a public officer's disclosure and abstention requirements are primarily technical requirements that lack the significance of other parts of the ethics law. But these rules serve a particularly valuable role in protecting the public's trust in government. The disclosure and abstention rules require that public officers disclose all private commitments that may affect the actions they take in their public position, which protects the public's right to know whether and how the decisions being made by those public officers are affected or influenced by their private relationships. Without a statutory requirement that public officers disclose certain private relationships, the public would have no means by which to obtain this information. Disclosure and abstention requirements are therefore of significant importance in protecting the public and keeping public officers accountable for any private interests that conflict with their public positions. Although the requirements of the disclosure and abstention statutes are mostly similar, they do have some material differences. The ethics law's disclosure requirement applies when a matter comes before a public officer that would be affected by a private relationship. In such a case, the public officer must provide sufficient details about her private relationship and its impact on the matter before her to properly inform the public about any interest the person with whom the public officer has the relationship has in the outcome. The private relationships that trigger the disclosure and abstention requirements are set by statute, but they are all relationships that are likely to have influence or perceived influence over the public officer. The disclosure requirement is therefore focused on the private relationship at issue. The focus of the abstention requirement varies slightly. It prohibits a public officer from voting on or advocating for or against any matter where the independence of judgment of a reasonable person in the public officer's position would be materially affected by the private relationship. Thus, the abstention requirement is focused on the private relationship as well as the matter at issue. This case involves City of Reno Mayor Hillary Sheevy's violation of the disclosure and abstention rules when the law firm she retained in her private capacity appeared and represented another client in a matter before the Reno City Council. Mayor Sheevy retained the law firm of McDonald Carano to represent her in a lawsuit she filed in December 2022. The lawsuit alleges invasion of Sheevy's privacy and, understandably, seeks recovery for Sheevy's significant fear and distress due to the defendant's trespassing and monitoring of her movements. In addition to other relief, the lawsuit seeks, at a minimum, compensatory damages in excess of $90,000 and exemplary and punitive damages of 3 times the amount of the compensatory damages award. Sheevy's lawsuit is still in the discovery stage, but already has issues pending before the Nevada Supreme Court. At the February 22, 2023 Reno City Council meeting, Josh Hicks, an attorney with McDonald Carano, appeared before the City Council and Mary Sheevy, advocating for an agenda item on behalf of another client, Toll Brothers. The agenda item was the first step for Toll Brothers to create a special assessment district in order to have the City of Reno issue a bond to pay for infrastructure costs on land owned by Toll Brothers, which would allow Toll Brothers to avoid paying those costs itself and being forced to add them into the price of its homes. Prior to providing his presentation to the council on the agenda item, Hicks announced his affiliation with McDonald Carano. It should be noted, however, that Sheevy does not dispute that at the time Hicks made the presentation, she already had actual knowledge that he worked for McDonald Carano aside from his announcement. At no time before or during Hicks's presentation, during the City Council's consideration of Toll Brothers' agenda item, or during the council's vote, which she participated in, did Sheevy disclose her conflict of interest related to McDonald Carano. The executive director's motion seeks summary judgment on his claims that Sheevy's actions violated both the disclosure and abstention requirements of the ethics law. Summary judgment should be granted in favor of the executive director because no material facts remain in dispute on these claims. The ethics law's disclosure requirement, which is in NRS 281A 420 subsection 1, provides that when a public officer's action regarding a matter would reasonably be affected by her commitment in a private capacity to the interest of others, the public officer shall not vote or otherwise act on the matter without disclosing sufficient information to inform the public of the potential effect of the action on the persons to whom the public officer has a commitment in a private capacity. To be entitled to summary judgment on Sheevy's violation of the disclosure requirement, we therefore must show that the undisputed facts in this matter demonstrate that Sheevy is a public officer, that she had a commitment in a private capacity to McDonald Carano, and that she acted on the Toll Brothers agenda without disclosing sufficient information to inform the public of the potential effect of the agenda item on the interests of McDonald Carano. The ethics law's abstention requirement, found in NRS 281A 420 subsection 3, requires that a public officer shall not vote on or advocate the passage or failure of any matter with respect to which the independence of judgment of a reasonable person in her situation would be materially affected by her commitment in a private capacity to the interests of another person. Therefore, to be entitled to summary judgment on Shivi's violation of the abstention requirement, we must show that the undisputed facts in this matter demonstrate that Shivi is a public officer, that she voted or advocated for or against the Toll Brothers agenda item, and that the independence of judgment of a reasonable person in Shivi's position would be materially affected by her commitment in a private capacity to McDonald Corona. The parties have stipulated to nearly all of the elements the executive director is required to prove to be entitled to receive summary judgment on both of these claims. As to disclosure, the parties agree that Mayor Shivi is a public officer. The parties agree that McDonald Corona represented Toll Brothers on item D1 at the February 22nd Reno City Council meeting. The parties agree that Shivi participated in and voted on item D1. The parties agree that Shivi made no disclosure on item D1. And the parties agree that Shivi has an attorney-client relationship with McDonald Corona. Therefore, the only remaining issue to be considered by the Commission regarding Shivi's violation of the disclosure requirement is whether the attorney-client relationship meets the substantial and continuing business relationship standard in order to create a commitment in a private capacity from Shivi to McDonald Corona that would be reasonably affected by her action regarding item D1. As to abstention, the parties agree again that Mayor Shivi is a public officer. They agree that Shivi voted on item D1. They agree that McDonald Corona represented Toll Brothers on item D1 at the February Reno City Council meeting, and the parties agree that Shivi has an attorney-client relationship with McDonald Corona. The Commission must therefore only consider whether the independence of judgment of a reasonable person in Shivi's position would be materially affected by Shivi's commitment in a private capacity to McDonald Corona. Public service is a public trust. In preserving the public trust, it is the most basic obligation of public officers to place loyalty to ethical principles above their private gain, to ensure that citizens can have confidence in the integrity of their government. One means by which the ethics law protects the public trust is by requiring public officers to disclose certain relationships that may affect or even only appear to affect decisions made by the public officers. As this Commission has stated, a public officer's disclosure is paramount to transparency and openness in government. The public policy favoring disclosure promotes accountability and scrutiny of the conduct of government officials. The private relationships that trigger the application of the disclosure and abstention rules are known as commitments in a private capacity. NRS 281A-065 sets out 6 categories of relationships that constitute commitments in a private capacity, all of which are likely to have influence or perceived influence over a public officer or employee. Each of these categories of relationship represent private interests held by public officers, and they trigger numerous ethical obligations under the ethics law. The category of relationship at issue in this matter is subsection 5, persons with whom the public officer has a substantial and continuing business relationship. This Commission has held for more than 20 years and has reiterated in a number of cases that the attorney-client relationship is a class of relationship that constitutes a substantial and continuing business relationship and therefore a commitment in a private capacity. One such case that is similar to this matter is in Ray Mack. In that case, Las Vegas council member Michael Mack retained Pui Premsray Rutt, an attorney with the law firm of Goodman, Brown, and Premsray Rutt, to represent him on personal matters. Another attorney from the same firm, Eric Goodman, appeared before the City Council representing a land use applicant on matters unrelated to Mack's private legal matters. The Commission advised Councilmember Mack that he should have made a proper public disclosure regarding the attorney-client relationship he held with the law firm and with Mr. Premsray Rutt, and must continue to do so when any member of the law firm appears in a representative capacity before the Las Vegas City Council. Another similar case is In Re Public Officer, case number 23094A. In that matter, public officer retained private attorney for private legal matters. Private attorney also represents a public employee group regarding certain ordinances within the public agency on whose board public officer sits. The commission held that, based upon NRS 281A.420 and previous holdings of this commission, if private attorney or any other member of private attorney's firm appears before the board regarding the ordinance or any other matter, and the public officer has actual knowledge the attorney is a member of the firm, public officer should make a disclosure. Public officer should additionally disclose any time a client of private attorney appears in front of the board if public officer has actual knowledge they are a client of private attorney or private attorney's firm. The commission also made a finding in Re Public Officer 23094A to distinguish it from the many Re Public Officers we have, that public employee must provide a disclosure even when in a matter even in which their private attorney has an interest comes before the public body, but no member of private attorney's law firm is present. So let me say that again. The finding was that the public officer must make a disclosure even when a matter comes before the board on which they sit, that they know their law firm, the law firm they retained in their private capacity, has an interest in the matter, but the law firm isn't even present. In Re Public Officer stated that if the same ordinance on which private attorney represents the public employee group comes before the board again, but neither private attorney nor a member of private attorney's firm appears before the board regarding the ordinance, public officer should still provide a disclosure because public officer has actual knowledge that private attorney represents clients with an interest in the ordinance. So that case went so far as to say that even if an attorney isn't present, if the interest is before the board, a disclosure is still required. Comparing the posture of In Re Mac and In Re Public Officer 23094A to this matter shows that this commission should follow its own precedent and find that Sheevy's attorney-client relationship with McDonald Corona creates a disclosable conflict when matters involving other clients of McDonald Corona appear before the Reno City Council. Summary judgment therefore should be granted as to Sheevy's violation of NRS 281A.420 subsection 1, the ethics laws disclosure requirement. The remaining issue for this commission to consider regarding the abstention requirement is whether the independence of judgment of a reasonable person in Sheevy's position would be materially affected by Sheevy's commitment in a private capacity to McDonald Corona. This commission has held that the judgment of a reasonable person is materially affected when the person with whom the public officer has the private relationship has a concrete or direct interest in a matter that comes before a public body. The commission has further determined that a public officer must abstain where a matter has the potential to affect a public officer's commitments in a private capacity to persons to whom she has a substantial and continuing business relationship. McDonald Corona has a direct interest in item D1 through its representation of its client Toll Brothers on the matter. And item D1 had the potential to affect McDonald Corona, to whom Sheevy has a commitment in a private capacity, through her substantial and continuing business relationship with the law firm. Applying this commission's precedent, Sheevy's independence of judgment of a reasonable person in her position would therefore be materially affected by her commitment in a private capacity to McDonald Corona. Summary judgment should therefore also be granted in favor of the executive director as to Sheevy's violation of NRS 281A.420 subsection 3, the abstention requirement. It is fundamental that in order to protect the public's trust in government, we must protect the public's right to know about the existence and extent of certain private relationships that may impact or appear to impact how public officers vote on matters before them. A public officer's attorney-client relationships have been determined to be one such relationship. When an attorney from a law firm that represents a public officer appears before the body on which they sit, the public officer is required by the ethics law to disclose the fact of their representation by the law firm, along with information sufficient to inform the public of the potential effect of the issue before the public officer on the law firm. Mayor Sheevy failed to make this required disclosure and also failed to abstain from voting on the agenda item at issue. Both of these failures were violations of the ethics law, and summary judgment in favor of the executive director on both claims is appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bassett. Mr. Shipman, please make your argument against her remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just getting my clock set up, so I
Oh, I was going to time you too. So that's
so I have an idea here. Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and for the record, John Shipman for Hillary Sheevy. Just to get right into it, what Ms. Sheevy's position is, the undisputed evidence will show that Sheevy does not have a commitment in a private capacity to the interest of McDonald Carano based on a substantial and continuing business relationship. That's the first thing. Assuming that the commission does find that she has a commitment in a private capacity to McDonald Carano, the undisputed evidence will show that Sheevy did not have to disclose on agenda item D1 because Sheevy's action on agenda item D1 would not reasonably be affected by Sheevy's commitment in a private capacity to Hosmer Henner, who is her attorney with McDonald Carano. And then finally, Sheevy did not have to abstain on agenda item D1 because the independence and judgment of a reasonable person in Sheevy's situation would not be materially affected by Sheevy's commitment in a private capacity to her attorney, Hosmer Henner. I don't think there's a lot of dispute about what the standard of review is. I think there's a lot that the parties have agreed upon. What I would like to say is that I believe that there's there's some confusion in the legal analysis between, on one hand, a substantial and continuing business relationship, and on another hand, a pecuniary interest. And I think that that's where this has gone off track. And it's Ms. Sheevy's position that the application of the substantial and continuing business relationship, in light of the facts of this particular case, it does not apply. And I'm going to go into that relative to Ms. Bassett's characterization of a couple of the cases. I think the cases are very important to understand. It's really important to note that 281A-0655 does not expressly state that any relationship involving an attorney and a client amounts to a substantial and continuing business relationship. You don't get that legal conclusion or that legal assertion from the statute. No, you get that from the case law and from commission opinions. And again, the commission opinions are fact-specific and they make sense within a factual context. So with that, I want to go directly to the Mack case, which has been discussed. And if you want to put up the Ms. Bassett's PowerPoint, that's fine on this case, just to remind everybody what it is. I would disagree with the characterization of the case. The attorney that appeared in front of the commission was Goodman, and Eric Goodman. And Eric Goodman, and I'll read you directly from the case, Council Mack disclosed, and this is on page 4 of 10, for the record, that Eric Goodman, Esquire, also does some legal work for the personal venture that I'm involved with, and concluded that I don't believe I'll have any effect on my voting ability here today. So this is not a case where, this is a case where the public officer's own attorney shows up in front of him. That's a much different case than what we're looking at with Ms. Sheevy. In Ms. Sheevy's situation, the attorney that showed up was Mr. Hicks, not Mr. Hosmer Henner. Mr. Hosmer Henner is representing Ms. Sheevy in the action in the litigation, not Mr. Hicks. And the facts are very clear that Mr. Hicks has absolutely no involvement in the litigation, in Ms. Sheevy's litigation. He does not involved with Hosmer Henner. He does not consult with Hosmer Henner. He's not building on the file. There is absolutely zero overlap between those two. And conversely, on the other side, there is no overlap as between Toll Brothers, which is Mr. Hicks' client, and Mr. Hosmer Henner. They do not work for each other in that sense. Yes, Mr. Hicks and Mr. Hosmer Henner are business partners, are firm partners, but that's a different thing, and that's important to understand within the context of these cases. So in the Mack case, and the thing to remember in the Mack case, and it goes back to the difference between a pecuniary interest. If somebody shows up in front of you and they're your attorney and you're paying them, you have a pecuniary interest in that. Whatever they're asking you for, you need to pay them. I mean, you have this matter and there's an interest in that. That's different from somebody else from a law firm showing up and the difference there is Sheevy is not a member of McDonald Carano. She is not in association. She's not a partner. She's not an associate. She's not under contract. And the difference between the Mack case in our case is in Mack, you had Mack associate with Goodman in engaging in a commercial enterprise for profit, namely Mack's business. So Mack hires Goodman to do some work for him. It's very similar to like an independent contractor relationship. And again, the case opinions that you have talk about this later on. But Goodman had a shared business relationship with Mack in Mack's personal business. That's different. That is not what Sheevy has. Sheevy does not have that at all. Sheevy did not associate with McDonald Carano in any commercial enterprise for profit. No, instead, there's a litigation going on, and as Ms. Bassett pointed out, she's trying to recover money's due for damages, legal damages. That's not a commercial enterprise. It is for McDonald Carano. It is not for Ms. Sheevy. Again, in the Mack case, Goodman appeared, so that was an appropriate thing. Goodman and Mack were in a commercial enterprise, so they had that potentially causes a problem. But here, Hosmer Henner did not appear and would never appear. So I offer those facts to distinguish Mack because I think that Mack has been totally misread and it's been totally overblown. Then I want to go to 23094A. And I need to point out some important points here. That opinion was published on October 31st, 2023. The alleged misconduct predates that opinion by approximately 250 days. This opinion was not in existence at the time that Ms. Sheevy committed her alleged misconduct. She could not refer to 23094A. She could not refer to Strickland, in re Strickland 20.018C, a 2022 case that this case is based upon, because that was, again, dealt by the commission in a confidential capacity, and a confidential letter was issued. There was nothing in the record that she could rely on and could look to other than Mack at that point in time, and that's important. That is important. The other important thing about the 23094 is that it announced a new categorical rule about attorney-client relationships. It said, oh, look, if there's an attorney and there's a client, I don't care. It's a substantial and continuing business commitment. That's different. We can look at every case that has been cited, and I'd be happy to go through that on my motion and distinguish each and every one of those cases. That in each and every one of those cases, you have people that were in business with each other. That's not what you have here. Sheevy is not in business with McDonald Carano. Again, in 23094A, the other big thing there is who was appearing? The attorney was appearing. The public officer went to get advice on, hey, my attorney may be appearing. What do I need to do? That's not the facts here. Hosmer Henner didn't appear, wouldn't appear, had nothing to do with any of this. And the problem with the 23094A is when you really get down to the foundation, what it does is it extends the holding in 1640C. 1640C, if you recall, and this is all in the briefs, is the Mayor Woodbury case. And in the Mayor Woodbury case, those facts are completely different excuse me. In the Mayor Woodbury case, you'll recall this is a 2016 case. In that case, Woodbury is the attorney. The public officer is the attorney. Urban Jungle is the client. In our case, Sheevy's the client. Hosmer Henner is Sheevy's attorney, not Hicks. It's not a comparable relationship. Woodbury's client appeared. Urban Jungle. In our case, Sheevy's attorney did not appear. It was Hicks. In the Woodbury case, you have Woodbury and Peel, and they're associated in a commercial enterprise for profit, namely the Woodbury law firm. Woodbury had a pecuniary interest in Urban Jungle paying client fees. Sheevy does not associate with McDonald Carano in a commercial enterprise for profit. She has no pecuniary interest in Toll Brothers or Agenda Item D. They're completely, so to just take that case and say, oh, if you have an attorney and a client, boom, then you have a substantial and continuing business relationship? No, that is a total gross overreading of that case. I'm just looking at time, apologies. It just makes sense. I mean, when you think about it, it really just makes sense on a common sense basis that what's happening is we're mixing up two different, completely different analyses. We're talking about significant pecuniary interest, which is like if I'm buying something from somebody, if I'm purchasing goods or services, and depending upon how much I spend, then I can have a significant pecuniary interest in that commercial transaction, right? And that does not amount to a substantial and continuing business relationship. Those are two separate concepts entirely, and they're not synonymous. The legislature created a category called significant pecuniary interests and one called substantial and continuing business relationships. And they can't be just like lumped together and one subsumes the other. No, there's purposes for that. And in one case, what it means when you have a pecuniary interest is that you have a financial interest in what's going on there. And you have to disclose that. But that's a different provision of 281A 420. And it's a different type of disclosure. When you have that disclosure, and like, for instance, an attorney shows up in front of you, and it's your attorney, and you, yep, I have to disclose, I have to recuse, but my disclosure obligation is just to say what my significant pecuniary interest is and what that effect is going to be on me. The problem is you're putting public officers potentially, or the commission, not the commission, but the motion and the argument is putting public officers in the position where it's like they're supposed to know as a client what their their attorney's law firm, whose clients they have, and what the impact is going to be on them of this. That's totally unreasonable. You cannot, there's no way to manage that risk. Now, that's different if you're in the law firm. If you are a Hicks, if you are a Hosmer Henner, if you are, anybody of that capacity, you can do that. You can manage your risk. You can do conflicts checks. You can find out who and when, and then you can disclose properly. And you do have that commitment. But when it's just a mere customer, when it's just a mere client, it's a client-attorney relationship, it's not an attorney-client relationship, then all you have is the money that you give that person, and that's all you know. And you don't have any understanding of their other clients necessarily, what their deals with their other clients are. You're not sharing profits with these people, you're not sharing, potentially expenses and downsides. And that's really the problem that we have here is that I think with 2405 or 094A, it's created a thing where, the rule is you can only be charged with what you know. Well, that's the beginning of it, but how do you even fight that? What are you supposed to know, right? And then that just becomes, something for people to just file complaints on and saying, oh, you should have known. And now you're having all these investigations about, you should have known? You should have known that this person was a client for this firm? No. That's not the way it should be. It should be, look, if Hosmer Henner shows up, your attorney shows up, I've got a pecuniary interest, I have to disclose it, I have to recuse, we're done. Otherwise, we're in a Mac situation, and Mac was terrible because here you are, you're trying to advise, in my opinion, from being a public officer or being a public attorney trying to help public officers actually make proper disclosures. I don't know what to do with Mac at this point because it basically says that as a client, you are charged with knowing what the potential effect is on the client. And that's not right. So anywho, those, I will just leave you with that. Those are the big, and I'd be happy to discuss any other cases, and I'm sure we'll get into them on my motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shipman. Was that it for your? All right, thank you. All right, next, Ms. Bassett, you have 5 minutes.
Just tracking time. First, turning to the issue of factual differences in the Commission's case law. The factual differences in the Commission's previous cases, as raised by Mr. Shipman, are not dispositive or relevant to whether her attorney-client relationship with McDonald Carano is a commitment in a private capacity under the ethics law or the Commission's precedent. What each of the cases cited shows is that the Commission has consistently held that the attorney-client relationship is one of the categories of relationships that falls within the ethics law's definition of a commitment in a private capacity. Distinguishing the purpose for which the attorney was retained or the type of matter before the public body does not change that the Commission has made the determination that attorney-client relationships are one that is likely to have an influence or perceived influence over a public officer that triggers additional ethical obligations for public officers under the ethics law. Looking at In re Mac, for instance, look really quick. The Commission addressed the facts of Mac in a later advisory opinion in re Romero. And in re Romero, the Commission described the facts in Mac as follows. The factual background for Mac relates to then Councilmember Mac's duty to disclose that he had retained Pui Premsray Rutt, an attorney with the law firm of Goodman, Brown, and Premsray Rutt, to represent him on a personal matter. Another lawyer in the same law firm often appeared in a representative capacity before the City Council on matters unrelated to Councilmember Mac's private legal services. The Commission advised Councilmember Mac that he should have made a proper public disclosure regarding the attorney-client relationship he held with the law firm and Mr. Premsray Rutt when any member of the law firm appears in a representative capacity before the City Council. Based on the language in re Mac and in re Romero, it is not Mr. Goodman that Mr. Mac had the attorney-client relationship with. It was Mr. Premsray Rutt, and which is factually the same as what we have here. Mr. Shipman argues in his briefs and here today that it would be impossible for Ms. Sheevy to disclose her commitment at private capacity to McDonald Carano because it's impossible for her to know the identities of all the law firm's clients. That's a misstatement of the requirement. As the Commission held in re Public Officer 23094A, a public officer only has to disclose what they have actual knowledge of. that case stated, essential to this analysis is actual knowledge of the interest by the individual to which a public officer has a commitment in a private capacity. Actual knowledge can occur if the lawyer presents specifically on an item, submits public comment on an item, or the public officer is otherwise informed by the lawyer or firm that they have an interest. So it requires actual knowledge. There is no, they won't know, it's speculative, they're gonna get in all kinds of trouble. This commission has held there has to be actual knowledge of the conflict for there to be a requirement to disclose. Then there's the argument about the different lawyers. The fact that it was Mr. Hicks who appeared rather than Mr. Hosmer-Henner does not relieve Ms. Sheevy of her violation of NRS 281A 420. This commission has found in multiple cases that the disclosure is required when any member of the law firm appears, and that argument also misconstrues how law firms function. A client retains a law firm. There are 4 attorneys listed on Ms. Sheevy's complaint, and if one or more of those attorneys were unavailable, another attorney would be provided. So, and there may be attorneys who work, they may not be Mr. Hicks and Mr. Hosmer-Henner, but there may be attorneys who work on both matters at a different level or at different times when there's discovery and issues heat up. And so it doesn't take into an account how law firms function and why there are special rules about conflicts that law firms.
Ms. Bassett, thank you very much. Mr. Shipman, now you may present your arguments for Ms. Sheevy.
Appreciate that. Let me just
Summary
set the
motion.
time. Apologies. Trying to,
We're all keeping time here for you.
yeah.
Doesn't matter. Okay. I do it this way, then I have to look.
Okey-doke.
Won't start until you're ready. So.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to try to go over this quickly. There's 3 things that, there's 4 parts of the presentation today. We're going to talk about substantial and continuing business relationships under NRS 281A 0655. Then we're going to talk about NRS 281A 421C, which would reasonably be affected by public officer's commitment in a private capacity to the interests of another person. And then finally, we'll talk about 281A 423, which is the reasonable person in a public officer's situation would be materially affected by the public officer's commitment in a private capacity. And I've already talked about that there is no substantial and continuing business relationship between McDonald Carano and Ms. Sheevy. And if you were to even find that, Ms. Sheevy did not have to disclose because Sheevy's actions upon agenda item D1 would not reasonably be affected by Sheevy's commitment in a private capacity to Hosmer-Henner. And Sheevy did not have to abstain on item D1 because the independent judgment of a reasonable person in Sheevy's situation would not be materially affected by Sheevy's commitment in a private capacity to Hosmer-Henner. We've talked about the standard of review. Let's just talk about what does the law say. It says NRS 281A 0655 says, a commitment in a private capacity with respect to the interests of another person means a commitment, interest, or relationship of a public officer to a person to whom the public officer has a substantial and continuing business relationship. 4 words. Those are all key words, key elements. We want to, and I need to compare and contrast that with compare and contrast NRS 281A 0655 with NRS 281A 239, pecuniary interest. And what does that say? That says 281A 239 defines a pecuniary interest as any beneficial or detrimental interest in a matter that consists of or is measured in money or is otherwise related to money, including without limitation payments or other money which a person is owed or otherwise entitled to by virtue of any contract or other agreement. So if I've got a contract with you, I have a pecuniary interest. That is different from substantial and continuing business relationship, though. They're just different concepts. A pecuniary interest isn't synonymous with a continuing, substantial and continuing business relationships. And importantly, and this is, I made the point before, but subsection 5 does not expressly state that any relationship involving an attorney and a client amounts to a substantial and continuing business relationship. That's what the motion said, or that's what the claim is, but that's not true. You don't get to that legal conclusion from the statute. You have to go to the case law, you have to go to commission opinions, and you have to look at the facts that are underlying and undergirding those opinions and what those facts were based upon. I want to talk about real quick about there was a Romero, because I know that the argument is that with Mac, they validated it with Romero. Romero's a totally different animal again. Romero, for those, Romero was employed by UV. Here, Sheevy's not employed by McDonald Carano, by Hicks, by Hosmer Henner, and she's not in business with them. In Romero, UV's interests were statutorily attributed to Romero pursuant to NRS 281A0654 as the employer. That's a totally different animal than Mac, completely different animal. And it's essentially the same analysis that you get with In Re Public Officer Opinion Number 15-74A and 218, namely that a private employer's interests are statutorily attributed to a public officer under 065 subsection 4. But in our case, Sheevy's not employed by McDonald Carano, Hicks, or anybody, and McDonald Carano's interests are not statutorily attributed to Sheevy under subsection 4. Okay, so what's the difference? Substantial continuing business relationship. That's what the legislature wrote. We got to find out what the intent is. So what do we look to? We look to the rules of statutory construction. We construe the statute as a whole. We look at the plain meaning, and we avoid making, whole section surplusage and having sections conflict with each other. It's got to be read to be consistent with itself. So how does the law define these four basic words? Business under Black's Law Dictionary is defined as a commercial enterprise carried on for profit. A relationship is defined as the nature of the association between two or more people. Substantial is defined as a considerable extent, amount, or value. And continuing is defined as uninterrupted and persisting. So based upon these definitions and applying the plain meaning rule and applying what the legislative intent was, a substantial and continuing business relationship means an association of two or more people in a commercial enterprise carried on for profit that is both ongoing and considerable in extent or value. You're in business with somebody. That's what it means. It doesn't mean I buy something from somebody. That's significant pecuniary interest. So the problem is if we apply substantial and continuing business relationship in the way that it seems to be they want to have it applied. Let's look at an example, like a plumber. Let's say I have a plumber, and he's been my plumber for years and years and years. And that plumber, he does my work, but it turns out he also does work for a developer. He's hammering out a subdivision somewhere, and he's getting paid $500 per house. Okay, well, under the rule that we're announcing here, I have a substantial and continuing business relationship with that plumber. That plumber is working for a developer. Now I've got a conflict. Same thing holds true if that was a contractor or a banker. That's the same thing. Maybe I have a banker, and I use him for my daily banking, and a developer uses him for a construction loan. What? So because that's a client of my bank, I have a commitment in a private capacity to my bank? No, that's not. No, I have if it comes up and my bank's in front of me asking me about that, I have a significant pecuniary interest in that transaction at that point, and I have to disclose and recuse. But I do not have a substantial and continuing business. I'm not in business with my bank. Again, and that you see that in all the case law. And time, Madam Chair, my clock. Okay, good, good. So, all right, so the undisputed evidence will show that Chivy is not associated with Hosmer Henner in a commercial enterprise carried on for profit and does not have a commitment in a private capacity to the interests of McDonald Coroner. Okay, so for the substantive law, here are the cases that apply. In re Woodbury, 99-56, 1999. In re Mac, 03-40, 2004 case. In re Commissioners A and B, 10-51A and -59A, and that was a 2012 case. In re Public Officer 13-71A, 2014 case. In re Rapson 1611C and 20-20C, and that's a 2014 case. In re Woodbury, which we talked about, 1640C, that's a 2016 case. In re Romero 19-059A, 2019 case, we touched on that. And in re Public Officer 23094A, that's a 2023 case that, as we discussed, actually postdates the alleged misconduct in this case. So let's look at all the material facts in these cases. In re Woodbury, 99-56, the 1999 case, the one that sets us off. In that case, Woodbury's son's firm was an association of two or more people in a commercial enterprise for profit. And as an employee, Woodbury's son is associated with the firm. Here, McDonald Carano is in fact an association of two or more people in a commercial enterprise for profit, but as a firm client, Chivy is not associated with McDonald Carano in the same capacity that Woodbury's son did. She is not a partner. She's not an associate. She has no business connection with McDonald Carano other than just paying for legal fees. As an employee, Woodbury's son had a pecuniary interest in clients' fee paid to the firm to lobby Woodbury. Here, you don't have that. There is no pecuniary interest in client fees paid to McDonald Carano. Chivy doesn't have that. In Woodbury, the son's interest was attributable to Commissioner Woodbury under NRS 281A-065 subsection 3. It was a family relationship. But again, we don't have that here. There is no imputed family relationship. There is no imputed familial relationship. So Woodbury is not on point. Woodbury, you can't point to Woodbury and say, oh, the material facts here are the same. We've talked about Mac. I'm not going to belabor it anymore. I'm just going to pass over it. But the bottom line is Goodman was Mac's attorney. He was showing up. And the problem was, that when Mac shows up, when Goodman shows up and it's his attorney helping him in a commercial enterprise, he's got to disclose and recuse because he's got a pecuniary interest in that. But we don't have that here. Hosmer Henner was Chivy's attorney. Hicks is not Chivy's attorney. Again, and there's no evidence, I put in the record, there's no evidence that, Ms. Bassett's point is well taken, but it's not evidence. To the extent that there are other attorneys at McDonald Carano that can fill in if one attorney like Hosmer Henner is out of pocket for a particular thing. That's a good point. And what I would say is that if you go with more the rule that I'm advocating for here today is, more along the lines of a pecuniary interest, that allows the client, somebody like a Ms. Sheave or a public officer, to set up boundaries and parameters at the law firm when she's first hiring that law firm, saying, hey, look, I don't want anybody who is touching any city business to touch this file or to provide any work on this, period. But if you adopt the rule that 2390-094A is advocating for, that's not going to be good enough. That's not going to be good enough. And it creates a problem because the client cannot protect herself. Now she can't go to that firm. Maybe it's the only firm that has that particular expertise. And again, we're not talking about going, it's not Miss Sheevy of Plato's Closet going and getting business advice for her business like Mac. No, she's going because she has, if it were a family law matter, if it were a car crash, those things have no bearing. So that's the Mac case. In re Commissioners A and B, I would request that you look at that very closely because that's a really good, that's reflecting a lot of what I'm talking about here today. In A and B, Commissioners A and B received a group discount from an attorney. And the county was actually part of that deal too. They were another party to that. So both Commissioners A and B had an interest in that relationship and in that agenda item. But Sheevy does not receive a discount or anything of monetary value from McDonald Corona. She has no pecuniary interest in the relationship in agenda item D1 that's comparable to what you saw in Commissioners A and B. In Commissioners A and B, their attorney would appear. Here, Sheevy's attorney, Hosmer Henner, did not and would not appear. Hicks does not and would not provide legal services to Sheevy. In Commissioners A and B, attorney provided legal services directly to A and B, and they both had prior relationships with that attorney. So that's different. We don't have that here. Sheevy has no prior or ongoing relationship with Hicks. It's just not the same. And again, the important thing here is that particular opinion does not address imputed conflicts of interest. No, that's just simply, A, it was an advisory opinion. B, it was the matter that they were getting advice about was when this item hits the agenda. It's not like when other items from this attorney come, what do I need to do? No, it was like, hey, look, I have an interest in this item. What do I need to do? So that's an important case, and I think that this is probably the case that you need to be looking at. Let's look at In Re Public Officer 13.71a. Again, this is one more case in the line of, it's different to be in business with somebody than to have a pecuniary interest in a particular item. In this particular case, the public officer was a partner in a law firm. And the firm operated as a business unit sharing profits and expenses. And as a firm partner, the public officer had a business relationship shared between him and his business associates. Again, those facts are completely foreign to what we have here. Sheevy is not a partner, associate, business associate, co-worker, independent contractor, or engaged in any enterprise operated for economic gain with McDonald Corona. McDonald Corona does not share profits, expenses, risk, or client information with Sheevy, and Sheevy does not receive any discount or financial consideration from McDonald Corona. Sheevy does not have a business relationship shared between her and Hosmer Henner. It's just not, the facts aren't there. In Re Rapson, this was another case that was quoted. In Re Rapson is just take away the law firm. I mean, it's just Premier Properties is a commercial real estate enterprise, and it represented a client buying a property from the city. And then Rapson was an independent contractor of Premier Properties. Again, he was in business with these people, with Premier Properties. So Rapson had a business relationship shared between him and his business associates and other agents of Premier Properties. Again, I'm not going to go over this, but Sheevy has nothing that looks like that. She's not a partner associate. She's not in business with McDonald Corona. Woodbury, we talked about it, the 1640C. Again, in that one, Woodbury was the attorney. Mayor Woodbury was the attorney. And his client was Urban Jungle. That's a totally different scenario from Sheevy, who is a client. Totally different scenario. That Woodbury had an interest in not only that client and that client fees, but also in the law firm that with Peel, his brother-in-law. Woodbury and Peel were associated in a commercial enterprise for profit, namely the Woodbury Law Firm, and they had a client, and it was Urban Jungle. So he had a pecuniary interest in that. Of course he had to disclose. Of course he has a commitment in private capacity to his partners. We're not disputing that. But here, Sheevy's only a client, Sheevy's attorney did not appear, and Sheevy does not associate with McDonald Corona in a commercial enterprise for profit. We talked about Romero. Again, that was a statutory imputation case, subsection 4, as an employer. Doesn't apply here. The fact that it mischaracterized Mac and the facts in Mac just means, in my mind, that that's something that needs to be corrected by this commission now, that there was a misreading of the Mac in the advisory opinion, which I can understand, the arguments may not be quite as sharp, when somebody's, neck is on the line. But in an advisory opinion, these are the types of things that make all the difference kind of in the real world scenario when you're a public attorney trying to defend in trying to give your public officers the advice and guidance they need. And the facts do matter. So I would say take another look at Romero and how it characterized MAC, and take another look at MAC, because I think it's different. And then 23094A, again, I've been over this. This is, you know, I'm not going to belabor that. Okay, so we've got this creation of the confidential information dilemma, you know, and this is what, when you take MAC and 23.094A and then you argue it in this way, you create this confidential information dilemma, and it's all based on the notion of actual knowledge. But other than the potential effect of the public officer's attorney in the public officer's private matter, as a mere client, a public officer cannot be expected to know the potential effect of the action or abstention on other clients. I mean, they're not privy to that information. They just aren't. So, I mean, they don't even know what it's going to mean for McDonald Carano if he gets, or they don't get what they're asking for. And you have that codified in like NRS 49035 through NRS 49015 inclusive. That's the attorney-client privilege. Those relationships are entitled to privilege. And we also know Nevada Rules of Professional Conduct, Rule 1.6, confidentiality of information. So even as the attorney to the client, you can't share that information about other clients. So you're putting the public officer in a position where they can't even get access to the information. Now, if it's on the other side and it's the attorney, like a Mayor Woodbury, yes, he has access to that information. And so I think that's where, that's the part with the 23094, is that once you kind of eliminate these distinctions between who's the client and who's the attorney, now you've just created this assertion. And what it's created this categorical rule, and it's mischaracterizing the facts in MAC. And it forces people now to choose between not disclosing and inadequately disclosing. That's the problem. And that's not, I mean, that's not what the commission's here for. You're here to make sure people succeed, not to make sure they fail. But again, I think this all could be resolved if we just looked at it in the way it should be, namely significant pecuniary interest. If your attorney appears, you have a significant pecuniary interest. Thank you, you're out. So that's the first component. So there are no facts in this case showing that Sheevy has a commitment in a private capacity to McDonald Carano. And again, we can go through all those cases. I won't do that, but none of them are comparable. Just in general, Hosmer Henner is Sheevy's attorney. He did not appear. He has no involvement in agenda item D1. Hicks is not Sheevy's attorney. He has no involvement in the litigation. There is no pecuniary interest in McDonald Carano, agenda item D1, Toll Brothers, or Hicks legal representation. That's Sheevy. She has no business association with him. She's not an employee. She's not a family relation. So there is no, based on that, based on those facts, those undisputed facts, there is no substantial and continuing business relationship here. Okay, now we go on to 421C. A public officer should not approve, disapprove, vote, or abstain from a voting or otherwise act upon a manner which would reasonably be affected by a public officer's commitment in a private capacity without first disclosing, et cetera, et cetera. And it's important that the commission precedent has said a commitment, a relationship alone does not trigger disclosure requirements. The matter under consideration must be reasonably affected by the commitment. And that was in Commission Opinion 12.15-15A 2012. Sheevy did not have to disclose on agenda item D1 because the undisputed evidence shows that Sheevy's action upon agenda item D1 would not reasonably be affected by her commitment in a private capacity to Hosmer Henner. So there's two additional cases that we need to talk about here. In Re Public Officer 12-15A, that's a 2012 case, that was offered. And in Re Public Officer 21-051A, that's a 2021 case. Well, again, the material facts in these cases are completely different from the facts in Ms. Sheevy's case. In the 12-15A 2012 case, this is where we had a public officer and another individual, member X, were members of a nonprofit board of directors. And as that, they had a commitment in a private capacity for each other because there's long precedent that says that. Hey, if you're on a board and you're in business and working together for a goal, yep, you've got a substantial business relationship there. Member X is an officer and a trustee of a thing called a private entity, and the city was considering a public-private partnership with that private entity. So members X interests, both the nonprofit board and the private entity, so she's got two interests, are directly related to the city's public-private partnership with the private entity. And the public officer in that case, the public officer is reasonably affected by members' interests in triggering the disclosure because, again, being a part of that board and having the same interests and pushing the same rock up the same hill, they had a continuing and substantial business relationship. In our case, however, Sheevy has no pecuniary interest in agenda item D1, McDonald Carano, Hicks legal representation of Toll Brothers. She has no business associated with McDonald Carano. She's not an employee. She's not a family relation. She's not on a board with anybody. Hosmer Henner is Sheev's attorney. He did not appear, and he has no involvement. So again, it makes sense in 1215A, that public officer did have, their interest was reasonably affected by member X's interest. But again, Sheev would not be. I mean, she's just a mere customer. And it's not her attorney. And then on 21.05, how much time? I'm sorry. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. In 21051A, in this one, the public officer's spouse was on a private business board of directors. And the board of directors' interest was in securing an agreement, and the spouse received benefits for serving on the board of directors. So the spouse's significant pecuniary interests were statutorily attributed to the public officer under 281A 0651. I mean, that's subsection 1. So in that case, the public officer was reasonably affected by those interests, by those. But in our case, again, we don't have that. Sheevy is not on the board of directors. Sheevy is not getting benefits, financial or otherwise, from McDonald Carano. Sheevy's paying for a service and getting a service. That's it. That's all it is. So based on that, there are no facts that show that she would be reasonably affected by her commitment, if she had one, to Hosmer Henner. Finally, 281A 423C, this is the abstention component. The independent judgment of a reasonable person in a public officer's situation would be materially affected by the public officer's commitment in a private capacity to the interests of another person. Sheevy did not have to abstain on D1 because the undisputed evidence shows that the independent judgment of a reasonable person in Sheevy's situation would not be materially affected by her commitment in a private capacity to Hosmer Henner. And the two cases cited here were Mack and 23094A. And again, Mack is inappropriate. Mack's attorney, Goodman, appeared. Mack and Goodman were in a commercial venture together. That's a Woodbury scenario. That's not a Sheevy scenario. 23094A, again, new rule, attorneys and clients. Whenever you have that, you have a substantial and continuing business relationship. That's the first time that's ever come out. And in that one, again, the public officer had a pecuniary interest in the item because the private attorney was going to be appearing and was representing clients. So, but again, if it needs to be set up so that public officer can say, hey, look, in my file, keep everybody who has any city business off my file. And then if there's a complaint, it's simply showing, look, totally insulated. Totally insulated. I'm a client. I'm not working with them. Now, if that public officer is in business like a Mac, that's fair. That's fair game. I mean, if they're working with McDonald Carano in a business capacity, yeah, then I think that's the same thing as all the line of cases, the 1640Cs. You know, you have a commitment to the other people in the firm, and you have to disclose that. So. But you also have the ability to mitigate your risk at that point. So in conclusion, and then I'll submit that, but that's the undisputed evidence shows that Sheevy did not have a commitment in a private capacity to the interest of McDonald Carano based on a substantial and continuing business relationship. And assuming that she had, the undisputed evidence shows that she didn't have to disclose because Sheevy's action on agenda item D1 would not reasonably be affected by Sheevy's commitment in a private capacity to Hosmer Henner and then by extension to McDonald Carano, because you can't have McDonald Carano a commitment to them without having at first a commitment to Hosmer Henner. I mean, it's a derivative. Sheevy does not have to abstain on agenda item D1 because the independence of judgment of a reasonable person in Sheevy's situation would not be reasonably affected by Sheevy's commitment in private capacity to Hosmer Henner. And with that, I'll yield. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Shipman. You actually had 2 minutes and 20 seconds left there. So if you want to finish it up. No. All right.
Thank you.
Ms. Bassett, you now have 30 minutes.